the second episode of Talk That Talk with Fallon and DLab. We're going to get it started. This is the week of the 4th of July. We're actually recording this show on the 4th. And the title for this show is Awaken the Week of the 4th. There's been a lot of stuff that's been going on socially, politically, as well as sports. And we just going to talk about it because it's Talk That Talk. You ready, DLab?
Of course. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, let's get it going. So, huge moment this week for Maya Moore. Huge platform that she has just with her celebrity being a WNBA superstar. And it was a great story about Jonathan Irons. He got released from prison after serving about 22, 23 years in prison when he was wrongfully convicted for the crime of assault and burglary with a weapon. What we call in Georgia, basically a home invasion, how they say it in the state of Missouri. But she really had used her platform well and was on the forefront, took leave from the WNBA to really fight for this man that she didn't even know, but just heard about his story and just became connected. And now he's like a sibling to her. And he just got released this week, actually last Wednesday, July 1st, which was huge after his conviction was overturned back in March. And then the district attorney or the prosecutor in his jurisdiction where he was convicted said that they didn't have enough evidence to move forward to retry the case. So a huge win for Maya Moore, especially in this movement of Black Lives Matters and bringing attention to Black men who are wrongfully convicted or anybody who's wrongfully convicted. Mm-hmm. And just a blessing for Jonathan Irons. He's released after 23 years. He's been in prison since he was 18 years old and now has freedom at the age of 40. So what are your thoughts about that? That's just huge for this week. And I think we should start the show with a discussion about this.
So I'm 41, I'll be 42 in October. I can't even imagine going to jail at 18 because you haven't even lived life yet. And to take away, I don't want to say the prime of his life, but, a large portion of the prime of his life and to have him incarcerated and in a situation where he has no control over his own destiny when he didn't even commit a crime is unfathomable. What a beautiful thing by Maya Moore. Really special person. One of the best basketball players to ever come out of the state of Georgia, male or female. And she has really left her mark now to show that she's a great person on top of a great basketball player. So one of the stories that I don't think I'll ever forget, and one of the positive things in 2020, we've had so many negative stories and negative issues. To have a positive story come out like this, I thought was a beautiful thing.
I mean, Maya Moore, she's engraved her name as an activist in this country and just really just in helping individuals who've been wrongfully incarcerated. That will always be remembered. And I played for the same AAU team or same organization she played for with the Georgia Metros, a strong connection with both of us growing up in Atlanta and Maya Moore being a product of the Metro Atlanta area. But that's just huge. That's what we're talking about. Professional athletes or just individuals who have statures using their platform for positive. And she did it. I mean, think about it. She just said, I'm not playing in 2019. I'm taking a leave because I feel strongly and passionately about this issue. And I want to help this man because I believe he was wrongfully convicted. And she stood by that. I mean, who has the fortitude to stand their ground and lose money from their occupation in order to be so passionate and to just go full throttle for something they believe in? And you could think about the likes, I would say LeBron James starting his whole movement with voter registration, trying to educate individuals because we have a big election coming up in November where people need to know where their voting polls or where they can go to vote and just be informed. So you can at least make an informed decision of whether you want to execute your right to vote or not. But it's just so important. And I think this is huge that we have Maya Moore, a Black female who really just is a change for justice. I say it all the time in my occupation as an attorney, a criminal defense attorney, that she saved a life. I mean, he lost 23 years, but at least he's getting his life back because he was wrongfully convicted and somebody actually cared to take a second look and at least assist him in trying to get his conviction overturned, which happened. And I think he will be indebted and forever grateful to Maya Moore for believing in him. Yeah.
So having been, you're in the justice system, so I think this is something that the general person or the lay person doesn't quite understand. Him coming out of jail, first things first, is he going to get any reparations for being in jail so long? And then number two, how does he move forward with his life? Will he be able to get jobs? Obviously, he has skills that he might have learned in prison, but do those apply to what's going on today? I don't know that, and the world is just so different. So kind of how do they move forward after being in a situation like that?
Well, those are good questions. Reparations, I mean, unless he sues the county, which is St. Charles County, prosecutor is Tim Lohmeyer. If he sues that county, or if he wants to sue the state of Missouri, he may have or be able to get some type of reparations for the years he's lost. It's not a guarantee, but it's more like a civil suit, because the conviction was overturned. But at the same time, they're always going to say it was a jury of your peers who convicted you. You use your constitutional rights to proceed with the trial. But that could be, he could get it, he may not get it. But as of being released, at least on his record, the sentence is vacated. So he will not have a conviction showing that he was convicted of burglary and assault with a gun, which is violent. And that would deter any employer from trying to hire you if you have something like that on your criminal record. So hopefully he will get employment or get gainfully employed since he's been released at some point. But I think with the national attention this has gotten, especially with Maya Moore supporting him and backing him, it's going to be people willing to give him an opportunity, because at the time he was allegedly 16 when this incident happened. No criminal history that I know of, or even if it was a juvenile history, that wouldn't be published. But for something like this to take so much of his life, he was sentenced to 50 years. He was going to die in prison if Maya Moore didn't step up and assist this man like she did, or bring attention and get the right people surrounding him so they could overturn this conviction. So hopefully, as a positive note, you don't see this happening too often. Appeals are hard to win, and I just applaud him for getting a second opportunity at life. And I just hope that he makes the most of it, which I think he will, because this is something he probably never even fathomed would have happen for him.
And again, great story by Maya Moore. In the middle of her prime, decided to play internationally and not to play domestically, so that she could pursue helping this gentleman get out of jail. I heard also, on top of that, the social injustices that she wanted to pursue. She also said, I read in an article that she just never had the opportunity to kind of sit still and spend time with her family, because they're women's basketball players. I don't think people really understand the grind that they have. They play in the summer in the States, but during the season, the regular basketball season, they're playing internationally. So they're constantly playing and, constantly pounding their body. They don't have a whole lot of free time. So she also got to just have a regular life, which is probably good for her peace of mind moving forward as well. So it'll be interesting now that this has subsided, now that she's gotten what she wanted, which was a great thing. Will she go back to playing basketball, or will she continue to pursue this? So we'll have to follow Maya and see what she decides to do. Moving on to our next topic, Cam Newton signed with the Patriots on June 28th. He was finally signed by NFL team. Cam Newton, Atlanta's own, Westlake High School. So we're glad to talk about some positive things about Cam. He was released by the Panthers in March 2020. He was the only active former quarterback league MVP who was without a job, which is crazy. With the accolades that he's had. He had the shoulder injury, which obviously he didn't play well, but everybody knows what kind of talent he is, what he did in high school, what he did in college, leading Auburn national title. So we know what kind of player is getting to the Super Bowl. He received a one-year contract that is guaranteed $550,000. His base salary is a league minimum of 1.05, but he could earn up to, and I've seen two different numbers. I've seen 6.45 and I've seen 7.05. In incentives as far as what he does during the season. He's earned over $100 million in his 10-year career, which is well earned. And then also he said recently in his Instagram, which he uses that crazy font. I don't know if you follow him. He uses a very artsy, eclectic font for all of his verbiage that he puts on his in his captions. That it's not about money for him; it's about respect. And he will earn everything that he gets. So what do you think about, obviously I know you have an affinity for Cam being from here. What do you think about the story, how his story has gone so far, and what do you see coming for him in the future?
Oh, well, I love to see a local kid or just, a local athlete doing well. He went to Westlake High School that has produced some of the best NFL players out of that high school. A lot have come out of there. You got Pac-Man Jones, I could say Kieran Fox, some other ones, Sean Jones. It's been some great players, but Cam is the top athlete. He won the Heisman and went to Auburn. So, injuries have plagued him the last few seasons, but when you talk about, you just said he's made over $100 million over his 10-year career since he's been in the NFL. He was an MVP back in 2015, I believe, where he had an incredible season and led his team, the Panthers at the time, to a Super Bowl. But since then, injuries have plagued him. He hasn't played a full season really since. And this is an opportunity for redemption. And I think Cam sees that. Like, he's getting the league minimum. And we talked about, or I've seen comparisons of other quarterbacks that are backups, and they're getting more guaranteed money than Cam Newton. He's a league MVP, a former #1 pick and Heisman Trophy winner. And he's proven himself well in certain situations. But I guess, when you go to play for the Patriots, they like to get deals and get steals. And they don't really pay anybody to the utmost. Even Tom Brady, when he was there, he wasn't getting the most for a quarterback because they understand there's other positions they have to sign players for because their whole mindset is team. And I think Cam wants to buy into that. It's a redemption year, but he's looking for respect. He's not looking for money. He wants to show that he can still play in this league and get the respect that he thinks he deserves. So I think this is huge. I love to see this Atlanta kid succeed. He's a little eccentric, a little eclectic, and I think that's what causes people some concern because his image is very important, and he shows that on his Instagram, his feeds. I think he even has a production company. That's why his videos look so awesome when you're watching it. He's producing it, trying to show you what he's been doing in this offseason. He's in fantastic shape, and I don't think that's ever been an issue for Cam, but it's just really if he can stay healthy and his new throwing motion that he started to incorporate last season to see how effective that will be in Bill Belichick's system. So this is going to be a great start. It's a redemption season. Even with COVID-19 going on, it's going to be interesting to see if the NFL can progress and start. But I'm excited to see what Cam can do and how he can perform with this Patriots team and under Bill Belichick's tutelage. It's going to be key, and I think it's going to be a special dynamic between the two of them and seeing what they can produce and put out there on the field.
Anyone a lot of money, like you said. So I think this is just kind of the Patriot way, man. And they usually, everyone, Kirk Cousins said this well, no one has gone into the Patriots who's had success before and not played well when he got with the Patriots.
Right.
So I anticipate the same thing with Cam Newton. I know Stidham he's marked in as their starter right now, but I would be surprised if they brought Cam in to be a backup. I'm assuming that they brought him in as long as he's healthy to be a starter, and I expect him to play well. And I think he will conform to their way. One of his main issues is language and his temperament, and I think that's not an issue with the Patriots. They kind of have a culture and a way that they do things, and I think he wants to win bad enough, and he has enough to prove that he will conform, and I think this will make him a better player moving forward. And I would be shocked and go in and play well and then end up signing a long-term deal with them. So I'm happy for Cam. Hope he does well, and looking forward to the season if we have one.
I think it's going to be critical to see what Cam can do this season. Like I said, it's his redemption season. But just piggybacking on that a bit, the NFL and like the Black National Anthem, that's going to be big. You got Cam playing for the Patriots, but to start the season for week 1, they're going to start playing the Black National Anthem at the start of each game for week 1, whether it's going to be a live band or if it's just going to be a recording. And that's going to be played before the national anthem. What do you think? And what are your thoughts about that, just moving forward into week 1 and with the whole Black Lives Matter movement?
It's going to be interesting. Lift every voice and sing. It sounds like for the entire week 1. I'm assuming at all games for week 1. So it'll be interesting to see how that's perceived for the general fan. I'm not sure that everyone will be excited about that. Obviously, the Black people will. And obviously, people who are understanding what point in time that we're in right now, strongly about it. But I'm a little torn. The NFL is the institution that put Kaepernick out when Kaepernick was trying to prevent some of the issues that we're a part of right now, and still has not hired him, trying to do too much to try to win people, or is this genuine? But my mentor, Paul Hewitt, always says, no matter why people do things, it matters the end result, and if it's a positive thing. So caught up in why they're doing it. I think to bring the attention to the issue and to show some love to African-American people and play Lift Every Voice and Sing, I should just be happy for that and try to move past what the NFL did in the past, and hopefully the future will bring better things for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's a positive, great song. I was like, some people may have to go back and look at the lyrics to remember the key verses with that song, but it's something that's always uplifted our descendants, our ancestors, what we were taught as kids, the Black National Anthem. And I think that's a huge step forward. I never want to say too little, too late, but it's a great opportunity, I think, to bring recognition to such a platform with the NFL, where they're going to have tons of viewership. People love watching the game of football. It's probably the new America's pastime besides baseball. So that's going to be critical. But moving on, the next topic we got here is the St. Louis couple, the McCluskeys. This was interesting. This was an interesting one right here. I think it was crazy to see. I was looking at Sean King's Instagram feed when I was on my Instagram and saw he posted, and he was like, this is going on in real time. You got this couple, this white couple in St. Louis outside of their gaudy, lavish looking mansion in this private subdivision in St. Louis called Portland Place, where protesters are just walking down the street because they're trying to get to the mayor's house, Lyda Krewson, who's the current mayor of St. Louis, to address her after she leaked the addresses and information of activists in the city of St. Louis who are against or for defunding the police. And that's been a huge discussion recently about different spectrums of what defunding the police departments in different cities actually means. Mm-hmm. But she actually put out names and addresses of these activists who are pro defunding the police. And it caused a huge stir to where these protesters went to Portland Place. It's been some discrepancies whether they tore down a gate or they actually entered an unlocked gate, which other people have said, or reporters in St. Louis who were present during the protest, and entered. Now, it's totally against the law. That was a trespass, entering that private neighborhood. But at the same time,
is it legal to post their names and addresses, though?
Well, see, I wouldn't do that. I couldn't say it's legal or illegal. I mean, if your address and name, if it's public, you go to the white page, it's public record. Like, you can easily find a location or an address for somebody. But as a mayor and a political representative of that city, and knowing like the tumultuous relationship that she already has with her constituents, with the Black Lives Matter movement, why would you post that? It is going to cause a problem. And these protesters, they were going to just show their civil disobedience and break some laws, but in a civil manner. These weren't like gangster protesters, like people were a mob, like they've been addressed on certain websites. These were peaceful protesters who did break the law by criminally trespassing in this neighborhood. But then at the same time, they were just trying to have their voices heard. And even with the best protest over the years, you need some type of civil disobedience to sometimes get your point across. And when they entered this neighborhood, you had the McCluskeys, this white couple, standing in their yard with guns. At no time did one protester enter their property, come to their front door, try to get physical with them in any way. And they were pointing, the husband was pointing a rifle and the wife had a handgun, and you can see in close pictures, her finger was on the trigger. That could have just been totally deadly, because there were a couple of protesters, according to people who were there, or the McCluskeys, who were armed. There were a couple of protesters that were armed, but at no time did they draw their weapons. They came into this property or this neighborhood and guns were already drawn on them. So that's definitely showing inciting violence. And the McCluskeys, they were on with Chris Como, where I don't think the husband, at least with his attorney, Mr. McCluskey, he didn't really like the questions Chris Como was asking him. but it was more so that Chris Cuomo was just trying to explain, like, why point these guns if no one damaged or entered your property? And I think so many Americans feel like they want to execute their Second Amendment rights. And I'm not telling anybody not to own a gun, because that is your right, and to defend your property, especially if someone is breaking in or damaging your property, and in doing it in a violent way where you may have to use some sort of deadly force. But in this situation, or under these circumstances, deadly force wasn't necessary. So what are your thoughts about that whole scene? It was pretty messy of how it played out and how it was viewed based on video.
I don't even understand why they came outside. I would have, if I felt threatened or if I felt nervous, I would have probably stayed in my home and maybe got my gun out and been prepared if someone attacked me or if someone came into my yard. But I'm assuming that the mob didn't even know who they were or where they lived. So I don't understand the point of coming outside and saying that you felt threatened if no one even knew who you were. You were anonymous until that point. You actually made yourself a target by what you did. So that's my first point of confusion. One is, why did she have her finger on the trigger? Because what if she made a mistake and accidentally pulled the trigger and shot someone? And if she did, I'm assuming someone would have shot back if weapons were a part of, or people in the crowd had weapons themselves. And then the man with the long gun, as people like to call them now, just kind of standing back. I felt like he didn't even really want to do it, but his wife was doing it, so he felt like he had no choice. So it's just a strange situation, and it shows where we are as a culture and as a society. And I think it's very sad that anyone would feel that that situation called for them to come outside with their guns. But it's just kind of where we are right now. It's unfortunate, it's sad. We can act like it doesn't make sense. And I think it doesn't make sense to us, me or you, or maybe some of the people who are listening to us. But there probably are some people who are listening to us who think that they understand where they were coming from. And it might be white people who understand where they are coming from. I think we have so much misinformation at the top that everyone is so confused and everyone has a lot of anxiety. And then if you add the pandemic and being at home, there's so much going on right now that everyone is uncomfortable in a lot of aspects about a lot of things. So it's just kind of where we're at. Hopefully this is a learning lesson for people to understand that this was the wrong way to handle this situation. I'm glad no one was hurt. That's first and foremost. But it's very interesting that they, as far as I know, have not been arrested for brandishing a weapon and pointing it at a crowd who was peaceful and not doing anything to them. And I think if they were regular citizens or even black people, that they probably would be arrested. And I know some people might say that's a crazy statement to make, but that's honestly how I feel. What do you think?
Well, I think it's going to take some time to investigate. Honestly, I think the backlash publicly of just being recorded and making national news, it's going to affect him in the long run. And I think that's why he's gone on so many national platforms to try and cover himself and explain the circumstances of how he felt that he needed to defend himself and his family. But it's a crazy set of circumstances, very unfortunate. But we just have to see how this plays out, because I don't think you ever want to use that type of violence against protesters unless it's very necessary. And that's your last measure of defense in those circumstances.
I agree. That kind of segues into our next topic. And is it Garrett Rolfe or Garrett Rolfe?
Rolfe.
Garrett Rolfe. Okay, so this week he got a $500,000 bond. It was granted on Tuesday, June 30th. The conditions of his bond are from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. He has a curfew. He had to surrender his passport. He cannot have any firearms. He can have no contact with victims and the victim's family. No contact with any city of Atlanta. And he also has to have an ankle monitor. So these are some very interesting conditions. The curfew obviously makes complete sense. Surrendering your passport makes a lot of sense. He's in for a murder trial, so I'm assuming it's regular protocol to not have any firearms, even though weird way, and people might kill me for this one. I'm sure he's nervous or feels threatened right now because he's a very popular name. And if this is one thing I always have an issue, like I don't understand why this type of information is released because, like you said, if it's public record where he lives, now someone who wants to do harm to him, which is not right, and I hope no one wants to do anything to him. I want to make sure that's clear. I don't think anyone should do anything to him. Knows that he's at home with no weapon and he has a curfew, and I think that's unfair because that kind of makes you a sitting target. So hopefully they allowed him to go somewhere else, or his home wasn't public record because he's a police officer. I don't know the details of that, but if that is the case, I think that's unfair. I don't think he should have any contact with the victim or the victim's family. I think that's pretty standard. No contact with any city of Atlanta police officers. I think that's unreasonable. If those are his friends, he considers those his family, his brothers. He's been a police officer for, I want to say, over a decade. I thought it was like 12 years is what I remember vaguely. For him not to have any contact with them, I think is unrealistic. I get the point. You don't want him to try to influence anyone's idea or anyone's opinion or try to find out information on the case. I get it. But I think it's unrealistic to say that he's not going to have contact with any City of Atlanta police officers. And then wearing an ankle monitor, I think, is pretty standard as well. This is a very high-profile case. As far as I know, and I could be wrong, this is the first time that a police officer has been charged with felony murder. And I'm in this type of case, rather. And I'm assuming that if anything happens somewhat similar, police will have second thoughts on should they shoot someone. Is the crime serious enough? Do they feel threatened? And I think that's what people want. They want them to think through what they're doing and not just react and have a knee-jerk reaction and do something, especially to a Black male or female in situations where, and somebody just broke this down. I don't know if you saw this on Instagram. Someone said that white people have been killed more by police officers than Black people have this past year, but someone did the actual mathematics to it. And if you do it by per capita, how many Black people it is in America, how many white people it is in America, it's not even close. 3 times as many Black people are killed than white people by police officers unarmed per capita in the United States. So you obviously, this is kind of your field, your expertise. I can't wait to see what your thoughts and ideas are on this topic.
Well, I mean, he is in this type of situation, I think, when he's like in the pursuit or in his position as a police officer. This is one of the first times in the state of Georgia that you've seen a police officer charged with felony murder. There have been other outside circumstances when they're not on duty. Okay. But in this scenario right here, it's pretty standard. The judge, she actually gave these conditions and restrictions. And I wanted this to be clear. Like, so many people were like, he should not get a bond and no bond for him. But it's certain factors that a judge has to follow, and they call them the Ayala factors, which it gives the judge reasons or why they should give an individual a bond or why they should not. And based on the fact that he had no prior criminal history, he should have been given some sort of bond, which this judge did by granting him this $500,000 bond. The conditions, pretty standard, but like you said, the reason that with the weapons issue, you said with no weapons and that being publicized, is because it's a publicized case. Like, it's on every news cycle around the country. So people are going to know the conditions, and that can easily be found and published. It's public record. But that happens for clients I've had in the past too. Like, no weapons. If it's a violent crime where someone has been shooting at someone, or if a weapon was involved or a gun, then no weapons during the pendency of this case. And then that goes to the matter later, if post-conviction, if you're a convicted felon, you can no longer have a gun. Ever. If you're on probation, during the stint of probation, you cannot have a gun. And those are usually conditions that judges do for public safety based on the crime and based on the fact that someone has decided to either plead guilty to charges or they've been convicted. But in this scenario, I think, like you said, it's good that he needs to have no contact with the victims. People are confused by that. They're like, well, the main victim, he's deceased. No, it was other victims in this case, because when the shooting occurred, there were cars outside of the Wendy's in the drive-thru, and a couple of those vehicles got hit with stray bullets when he was shooting at Mr. Brooks. So those are the other victims that are specified in Mr. Brooks' family he can have no contact with as well. Now, as we're dealing with the police officers, we're talking about reform in police departments. And I think in this scenario, it is critical because there's going to be a lot of police officers that will be called by the state to testify either for or on the defense side for the state against Officer Rolfe, just to see how his past dealings with other individuals that he was in pursuit or he arrested, how his interactions with them were. So it's going to be critical to get that outside, unbiased type of, explanation from these individuals if they are called to testify, because this case is going to trial. He's not pleading guilty to this at all.
Will it be unbiased, though? That's the big question.
Well, that is the question. Like with any witness you have in a trial, you hope they're unbiased. I mean, it's certain factors that attorneys use to try and show bias in a witness. And it's a whole different procedure and explanation of how you do that. So I won't get into that whole jargon. But in this scenario, you just hope it's not. You know, all you can hope for in a trial that you get as much of the truth as possible, that you could give a jury enough evidence or enough of a presentation where they could just make an honest opinion and judgment of an individual who's testifying. So like you said, it is a brotherhood. And, you know, a lot of these police officers may be for him and don't want to convict him, but you want to make this as unbiased as possible. So that's why a judge, like the judge did in this scenario, would put that type of condition of the bond that you to have no contact and no conversations with any other Atlanta police officers who work for that department. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting. The ankle monitor will be able to track and see where he goes, but I'm sure he's probably going to stay in his home with his family and try and protect himself and not be seen out in the streets. I know that's the advice that he's probably getting from his attorneys at this time.
I would hope so. There are a lot of angry people around and people who would make poor decisions if they saw him during the current time that we're in now. So hopefully for his sake, his family's sake, even though I don't agree with what he did, I don't want any harm to come to him. So I'm hoping that he makes the good decision of staying at home until this trial, and we'll see what happens when he gets there. It is going to be very interesting. The entire world will be watching. Unfortunately, we have some other cases that no one's talking about. I haven't heard anything about Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia. So we have another huge case in Georgia. So it'll be interesting to see. A lot of people have their eyes on both of those to see how these are handled as we move forward.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be Ahmaud Arbery's case is going to be sitting for a while. They were able to get an indictment, and we don't even have grand jurors in place right now. But because of the whole tolling or the judicial order that's in place for the Supreme Court, they were able, if they already had a group of grand jurors in panel, to go ahead and indict his case. So it's no trials coming anytime soon, but those individuals, the McMichaels, were indicted. So that's good to see and good to hear. So moving on, we got Makur Maker. This is a big story, and this was on everything on social media yesterday. It goes with the Black Lives Matter movement or just with Black athletes going back to HBCUs. And, going there, trying to generate money. They know that they're going to be marketed well, TV deals, everything else that works. These 5-star athletes, the television networks will follow because they want to see them play. And even though this kid may be a one and done, he's making a huge sacrifice because he believes that HBCUs should get more notoriety. And 5-star athletes or just great athletes should start paying attention to these schools and playing for them. So what are your thoughts just on what happened yesterday with him committing to Howard University?
I at Florida A&M prior to finishing at Georgia Tech, where obviously, you played as well. So I kind of have a little bit of an inside track on how HBCU basketball goes, going to a HBCU, having a lot of friends that graduated from there, understanding and there are a whole lot of positives. My experiences at both schools are vastly different. And I understand kind of the culture and the ideology of going to HBCU, which is a terrific experience. And it'll be interesting to see if his accepting a scholarship offer from Howard can kind of transform or transition the higher profile athletes into doing what a lot of people think that we should do, which is send our best players to the Black schools and kind of give us some more power, which will generate more revenue, which will increase the visibility of these HBCUs. A lot of people feel like if the majority of athletes in basketball and football are African American, why do we not have the NFL players and the NBA players coming out of HBCUs? A lot of people don't know, not this past year, but the 2 years previous, the 2 rookies of the year came from HBCUs. Tariq Cohen went to South Carolina State, and I'm forgetting the African-American athlete who came from the school. So back-to-back years in the NFL, the rookie of the year came from HBCUs, which I think is a very interesting fact. Obviously, we've had quarterbacks like Ronald McNair, who went to HBCU. So we've had some great athletes come. It happens more in football than it does in basketball. It very rarely happens in basketball.
Mm-hmm.
So for Makur Maker to make a decision like this is a huge deal. But a couple things have to happen. He has to go to Howard. That's the first thing. Does he end up at Howard? A lot of people think that he'll still end up overseas, or he still might do the G League deal. So does he go to Howard? And if he goes to Howard, he has to play well. If he goes to Howard and doesn't play well, regardless to if it's his fault or not, it will be taken as he made a mistake of going to HBCU, and it will completely kill it for the next 5 to 10 years. Completely kill it. If he goes and plays really well and gets drafted in the first round, or even gets drafted in the second round, then it might open the floodgates.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be very interesting. That coach, who I know is excited right now, has a major task on his hands. Makur Maker, if he comes on campus and plays, he has to play well because everybody will be watching. So I'm going to have both eyes on it, the entire basketball world. People know that I was a basketball coach and played basketball. I've been getting all kind of DMs and texts. Everybody's really interested to see what I think, and also knowing that I went to FAM. So I'll have my eyes on it. And kind of, what are your thoughts on what you think is going to happen?
Well, I think it's just a huge start. Like you said, Steve McNair from the NFL back in the day, he went to an HBCU, and we know what he did. He led the Titans to a Super Bowl. But I think this is going to be critical. He already gave another kid who's already mentioned, Mikey Williams, who I think is a rising sophomore out of California, that he's already said that he would be interested in attending an HBCU, is going to strongly consider HBCUs when it's time for him to make a decision on what school he wants to attend. So he is starting the path, and he knows there's a lot of pressure on his shoulders, but I commend this kid for having the courage to go out there. Howard University is a great university. They've produced some of the best people from that school. So it's going to be important just to see if he can leave his mark. He's going to probably be there for a year. This kid's like 7 foot and can handle the basketball like a point guard at that height. So I know, like, scouts in the NBA are already licking their chops trying to get this kid to the league. So I don't think it's a matter of if he's going to go to the league. But I agree that he has to have a successful year. But I think people will be drawn because they want to see what he can do. And that's with all the major programs, the Kentuckys, the Dukes, the UNCs we see year in, year out that produce such great athletes. But at the end of the day, they know people are always going to be watching them. They already have the TV deals. But it's going to be great to see if Howard can start getting those TV deals, start playing some better competition so they do have more televised games. And I think this leads to what else I want to talk about. We know Morehouse College just recently said that they're just cutting and not even having fall sports this season because they can't even afford it, because they don't have the money in their budget to account for the number of COVID tests or testing they will need for their athletes to have reoccurring testing just to keep their athletes safe. So when you start seeing kids like Makur Maker going to HBCUs and hopefully being able to generate money for these institutions, it's going to be huge. So these HBCUs don't have budgets that already are strawn out, and they don't have enough money, and they're able to thrive and continue to succeed and grow. So I think that's huge. I think it's key.
I think a lot of the smaller schools are really worried about what they're going to do this entire season. And if you take away football, even some of the bigger schools are going to struggle financially. I know a lot of coaches are already taking pay cuts. I've heard of a lot of guys taking 10% pay cuts. A lot of Louisville fired like 40 staff members in their athletic department a couple months ago. So people are it's going to change the whole model of athletics. I don't think coaches are going to get paid as much as they've been getting paid moving forward because of the COVID situation. And also, it's just been a bad model as far as how the structure of how people have been getting paid versus the revenue that's come in, because a lot of these schools operate in the red. But as we go down to the topic that we're talking about now, maybe not just HBCUs, but Division IIs, Division IIIs, NAIAs are really worried about what they're going to do. And I've even heard that junior colleges are thinking about not doing anything the fall semester and doing all of their sports starting from January. I've also heard that some people are talking about doing football and basketball, which are the more contact sports, after January, and doing baseball, softball, the sports where people are a little bit more socially distanced in the fall. So it's going to be interesting to see how everything plays out, and if we have seasons at all in amateur sports or professional sports moving forward.
Got you. Well, that's going to be key, and we just going to have to sit there and watch and see what happens in the coming weeks as we get closer to fall sports, or just, student athletes going back to schools, and whether these sports are going to even happen for 2020. So we got to stay tuned. But I want to give a quick shout out. I think it's something important we have to do. Since we now have this platform, I want to start shouting out Black-owned businesses, entrepreneurs who are just doing great things in the community. And I'm going to shout you out, DLab. This is a shirt, free-ish since 1865. You made for me, and I appreciate it. Wanted to give you a shout out. And anybody else interested in buying some of DLab's work, you go to D_lab work on Instagram, and you can find his work and locate him and shoot him a DM and tell him what you want. So congratulations to you. The shirt behind me with Malcolm and Martin, you also did that shirt. Great work. And I just want to shout you out and just say that you're doing great work around the community and have a great product. So I appreciate the shirt.
I appreciate you. I'm just trying to put out good things and have good positive vibes. And I appreciate the support from Black businesses. And I'm trying to do the same as well. I think it's something that we kind of touched on in a little bit of different areas. But if we support each other, maybe we can end some of the issues that we've had so far, and we can kind of create our own wealth in our own communities. And it's something that we have to make a concerted effort of. And then we also have to have good products and good business practices so that people want to come back to us. It kind of has to be a two-way street. We can't do bad business and expect people to just, break bread with us because we're Black. We have to give a good product as well.
I agree. And just continue to do the great work, and we're going to continue to support you. So this has been a great episode, episode 2, Awaken the week of the 4th, as we do this podcast on July 4th and just celebrated our descendants and ancestors that served. And we appreciate and love the freedoms that we have today, but we still have a long way to go. So free-ish since 1865, we have to continue with the movement, continue with the narrative, and push forward to see what change that we can make in this country, especially in Black America. So I appreciate you, Daryl LeBerry, DLab. Thanks for coming on and hosting with me again. And we appreciate the viewers, the listeners that we have for this podcast. Continue to stay tuned, and we'll be back for episode 3. Stay tuned.